That's right. Alessia Crucitelli, but now you're going by Cruci now?
Yes.
Cruci,
Yeah.
okay. She is the director of Leaving the Factory. We have Andrew Levay, producer of Leaving the Factory.
Thank you.
Agata de Santis, director of Rossi and Company. And Charles, now you say Chloe Charlie? Sabba, director of Defending the Peninsula. So I'm going to open up for your deepest questions about this film. So please, if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll select you. If you could stand up, you can go ahead and ask your question. All right? Anyone have any questions? Don't be shy. Okay, Tommaso, stand on up.
Tommaso Mazzolorso, NOIAFT member, Ostia member, a lot of members for anything. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. There was 150 women that died, 78 escaped. One was my great-grandmother that escaped.
Yeah.
I've been here 22 years, but my family's from all over New York. I'm an international baccalaureate teacher from the IB program in American history. So, I guess my question is how did you come up with all the consulting to bring this, because I'm actually teaching this lesson next week, because I'm about to teach the Progressive Era in my classroom. How did you, who came in as the US history or Italian American history experts, and how did you develop this idea? How long did it take you to come up with this idea?
So it's a long story and a short story too at the same time. So I grew up in Italy. I was born and raised there, as you can hear probably from my accent. And my elementary school teacher used to tell me that story every year for Women's Day. And so I was like, I needed to write a script for this competition that SMC was having. And I didn't have any ideas. I was like, what am I gonna write? And one day I was on a hike with a friend and we were talking about feminism and we were learning in school about the early days of feminism, and the story just came up into my mind and I was like, oh my god, I know that story, I've known that story my whole life, but I don't hear about it. Except that teacher, nobody ever told me that story again. And even in school, I never really heard it, probably because, I don't know, maybe it's just knowing the curriculum of colleges and university here. So I just started making researches online, and I did most of stuff myself. I just remembered a lot that story because it was that story like Cinderella, you've been told that story so many times, you don't know how you know it, you just know it. And so I just started making researches to be as accurate as possible. And then I
brilliantly accurate, just so you know.
Oh, thank you. It was honestly, it was very hard. On the web at the time, and here we're talking about 2019 right now, on the web I could find very little things. It took me a while to even find the actual name of the factory. And then I eventually went to libraries and actually found books written about it. So I went to the old way.
You should email me.
Oh my god, I wish I knew you. Oh my god. And so so that's how I basically came up with the story, and I tried to be as accurate as possible because it's a story that is very close to my heart. It's a story that I grew up with, and I feel that a lot of values that I have nowadays in my life come because I've known that story for so long, and has deeply affected me in my growing up.
Just historically speaking, it was excellent, all the way down to when he said, "My conscience is clear." He actually did say that. My conscience is clear, we can do this. And it was just spectacular accurate, and I commend you for it.
Wow,
thank you so much. I can use that next week in my classroom, that'd be even better. We'll talk later. We'll talk later.
Andrew, how did you get together with Alessia for the production?
Yeah, so for our school, Santa Monica College, once the script was selected, we did a table read, and I wanted to work on it and produce it. I was interested in the ending specifically. It's very tragic, but I felt they owed, the women who died were primarily between 14 and 23, and so they didn't really live their full life, so they deserved to at least have their story told in films like this.
Yeah, and now you grew up all over the world. Was this ever in the curriculum when you were studying?
It was not actually, but I did do the IB program in Vienna, Austria.
Okay.
Yeah, it was not though, unfortunately.
Well, thank you
Depends
for
on the
bringing it to
teacher.
life.
Depends on the teacher.
Agata, how did you get inspired to tell this story? You're from Canada. How did you hear about Ernie all the way?
I am from
Italy?
Montreal. In 2010, I directed and produced a documentary film about Malocchio, the evil eye. And a few years before that, when I was starting to do when I started shooting it, I wanted to film a store owner who sold amulets. So I went to New York, Little Italy, and Ernie was there. And I met him, and he was a great interview for the film. So then over the years, every time I went to New York, I'd go see him. And I always felt I wanted to do something just on him. I just needed the opportunity. So when I came across this competition, this grant, I'm like, I have an Italian-American story to tell. So yeah, that was it.
Awesome.
Is he still there?
Yes. So his shop is in trouble. With the pandemic, it was not easy. The landlord does want to, so they don't own the building, which is always a problem. They are probably going to move. There's going to be, I guess, a third incarnation of the shop, because where he is now is the second. I think by the spring we'll know where he is going to be, because I don't think it's 100% confirmed, or publicly confirmed at least.
Yeah, I've never seen a community come together more than when I saw the GoFundMe page
Yes.
for his shop.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, everybody.
And it's kind of sad they use that GoFundMe to pay back rent, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
So, my name is Carmen D'Angelo, and about 3 weeks ago, I went looking for an espresso machine because I accidentally threw it into the washing machine and it was disgusting. I was embarrassed to use it. So I went to Little Italy. I didn't know anything about this shop, and I was intrigued because it was disgusting. It had boxes all over the place. And I said,
He's a bit of a hoarder.
yeah. And he was just lovely because I said to him what happened to my espresso machine, and he goes, well, all you have to do is clean it and you'll be okay. And I'm like, wow, he didn't take my money. And so I was intrigued with him. So I stayed around and I just kept asking questions. And then he told me about the story about losing his wife and his best friend, and my heart. So I know how you were intrigued by him. He is amazing. And then he started to serenade me.
So he does that probably about once a day. A lucky customer will get serenaded by him.
Not one, but 6. So I can see why you have been intrigued by him.
Yeah.
He is an amazing person. Just heart, all heart. So
Yeah,
congratulations.
and the neighborhood takes care of him.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
he always gets fed. If you're there, like a bag shows up, or even sometimes a platter from a restaurant in the neighborhood. I'm not sure if it was pre-planned. I feel like it just shows up. So everyone knows him there. He is the heart of Little Italy. Like, he knows everyone knows him. Yeah.
So, Charles, you weren't a filmmaker before. Why did you get into filmmaking? Because once you go in, you can't really go back out. Okay, so we're expecting more from you.
I'm a little bit of an amateur. This was my very first one.
Wow.
But I am very passionate about film, Italian American filmmakers and Italian films. I love Totò, Alberto Sordi,
Of course.
so many.
Well, what are all our favorite Italian films?
Ooh.
Italian or
Italian. You could go Italian American, whatever you like.
Well, Italian American. Not really made by Italian Americans, but Moonstruck for me has always been.
Yeah.
I like this.
It's amazing how non-Italians got every little thing right. There's even a little ode to Malocchio in that film, which I love.
How about you, Andrew? Do you have a favorite? Are you Italian, by the way?
I'm not, no.
Get out of here. Do you have a favorite?
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
For now.
I would say Moonstruck. We were actually talking about that earlier today.
Moonstruck?
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you?
Life is beautiful, but I'm a little biased. I mean, he's a homie. He's from Florence.
Of course.
But yeah.
I love Bicycle Thieves.
Oh,
and
yes.
Sarah McCarthy, so that's it. Any other questions?
Charles, Mike Orfini, the last bill that Obama signed in January of 2016 was the HERE Act, the Holocaust Exploitation Art Recovery. Has that helped at all in bringing some of the art back to the original state where they were made?
That's a whole nother area. I have a friend, Chris Marianello, who I'm about to interview for La Voce di New York, who has made some pretty serious recoveries in court. It gets tricky because certain nations are really helpful when it comes to, because say a painting is discovered in a museum. A lot of museums have works that were taken during the Holocaust and they just don't know who they belong to. Now that they have to put it on their websites and make public what works do belong to someone, but they don't know who, you can see what works were taken from the Nazis. They just don't know who to return them to. A lot of times someone will see a photo and say, oh, that was my grandma's house, or that was my great-grandfather's house, and that I saw in the museum in Austria, or wherever they're, and then it becomes a fight. You know, there's the famous movie that was made about the woman in Vienna with the Clint, but in America, I know they run into issues, and I'm not an expert in Holocaust repatriation, but I know they run into issues with certain statute of limitations.
Well, this is what the bill is. The bill eliminates that statute of limitations. That's the key of the bill.
The thing is, if in America they're good about this, and that's why they really don't want to loan things, because once it comes here on loan to a museum, they will tell them it's not leaving until this is worked out.
Yeah.
But it is still very tricky, and it's long legal process, long legal battles.
Thank you. Taylor, just one more question.
Okay.
On leaving the factory, what was the ethnic background of the owner of the factory?
I'm pretty sure that it was a white person because he probably knows better. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just because like in 1910, if you think about it, like there was not mixed races in factories or in general. So like definitely couldn't have been someone that it was like not white owning like something that then white people were working in, if that makes sense.
I just have a comment rather than a question. I grew up in New York. I am a Rossi, but not related. And I've been going to E-Rossis, or being brought to E-Rossis since I was about this tall. And in my family, it was known mostly for the place to get either a religious statue or a painting or a photograph. So if you had a funny name and you wanted to find a picture of that particular saint, you could go there and find it, or they would find some connection in Italy to get that for you. And I think the most memorable one that I have is the one of St. Cosmas and Damian, or Cosimo e Damiano. When I started medical school, that was my gift. So we were in there, what, about 5 years ago? Before COVID. And they were selling a lot of stuff that we considered, this must be for the tourists.
Yeah.
You know, but the real meat and potatoes, you can't make a lot of money on that, but I think if they went high on the internet, they would probably do well.
So that might happen if what's supposed to happen will. But he still has all those religious, the cards.
They
like,
have all sizes.
Yeah, and
Now it's
anything
all
religious
different.
you go from little statues to some enormous statues. But he definitely caters to tourists, but he still has some, he still has the Italian music.
Yeah.
He's got a bunch of things from Italy, yeah. But it's definitely an eclectic collection of stuff in that shop.
Is there an Italian Canadian equivalent to him where you more? Is there someone who's
So we've got our own little Italies, Montreal, Toronto, some other places. Toronto, unfortunately, had a great shop that sort. They have, I think they shut down. In Montreal, so we've got sort of the original Little Italy, you know, kind of like in New York, right? The Italian community is spread out in Montreal. So we don't have any more souvenir shops in Little Italy, but you can find knickknacks in different neighborhoods in the city. So we've got maybe 3 or 4 shops that kind of sell a variety of items, and they're sort of all over the city. So but like Rossi, no. Exactly like Rossi, no. Yeah.
Any other questions, Tommaso?
Charles, I got a quick question for you. And I can't elaborate on it because I can't prove anything. Has your search, on all seriousness, has your search yet led to conversations with John D. Rockefeller's great-grandkids that are still in New York and J.P. Morgan's great-grandkids? Because that's who you should be talking to.
Well, you know, famously, Rockefeller filled the Met with artifacts and on his travels, but an interesting point about about the Getty. You mentioned grandkids. The one grandson was kidnapped in Italy by Calabrese, and he was willing to give. I think they wanted 1 point something. They wanted at first many million, and he bargained with him. He refused to give him the money, and then he started bargaining with him, and he got it down, and then he finally gave his son a loan. So he gave like $1 million and said it was 1.5 million. He was willing to pay 3.5 million for the victorious youth, the Lisipo di Fano, and he was willing to pay twice what he was willing to pay for his grandson. They ended up paying actually more than he was willing to pay. They bought that statue after he died. He wanted certain documents, which would have probably included, I'm sure, a license of export from Italy. It was exported out of England to California legally. So everything that Getty did was legal, but they know, and Marion Chu admitted to this. I'm going on a tangent, not answering your question, but I just wanted to get this in. She admitted, and so did Thomas Hoving of the Met, they knew what they were buying. It was the way things were done. They knew it was looted, and she claims that if she was the only one at the Getty, that if she found out eventually where it came from, she'd question its provenance and send it back. She wanted to know why others weren't indicted. Thomas Hoving bragged about it later in interviews, like the good old days when we could go to Italy and do what we want. But as far as Morgan, I haven't heard of any questionable purchases in that collection.
Track down his great-grandkids.
But I will say this, in the old days meaning 100 years ago, and things were done differently, especially in Italy, and it's unfortunate a lot of times people would be involved that shouldn't have been, like art dealers and even priests in parishes.
Well, there's a reason why Morgan died in Italy, and there's a lot of reasons behind that. So I have always wondered his great-grandkids, what they had. Because he was acquiring Italian art like no one else in the United
But
States.
there is something, the really good law that was a national law was 1909, made in 1909. The best law was 1939. Then the Constitution in 47 with Article 9, which protects, you have to protect our patrimony. Pre-1909, you had, from the Vatican states in the 1800s, they made some laws, but only covered the papal states. So it's still a moral question. If you know it was stolen or smuggled, do you want to keep it? There's many laws, many agreements, like the UNESCO agreement. And if it was before UNESCO, do you still want to keep that in your collection? You would want to keep a nice reputation for your, especially with this Lisipo, we aren't going to rest until we get it back. You know.
Have you seen All the Money in the World?
Excuse me, no.
No, it's a really good movie. Christopher Plummer was in it. It was about the kidnapping.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'd like to see that.
Check it out. Really, really good. Questions.
No, I just wanted to commend all of you for an amazing story that you to be told. And one thing about the art, I don't know, like a month ago when the UN General Assembly came in, the Colombian president flew with his presidential plane with 50 boxes full of looted indigenous art crafts. So there's also a huge movement in Latin America to fight the Spanish, to get all of those
Yes, of course.
patrimony back, and then Nigeria is fighting.
And a big help is who I mentioned in that film, Matthew Bogdanos of the Manhattan DA's office. They have a unit that is dedicated solely to archaeological and artifacts, art and antiquities, an antiquities unit.
Yeah, so I just feel like if that voice is united in terms of like all of these things need to come.
And that goes back to Rockefeller and different adventurers who, when you go to the Met, I mean, I love looking at mochi. I love looking at different artifacts from Peru, and you love looking at it, but it should be where it definitely, no museum should keep something that was illicitly. I don't care if it was Cesnola, the first director who we're proud of. He was a war hero, he's an Italian, and it was different back then, but if he brought in artifacts that were smuggled out of a place and the Metropolitan was displaying them, it behooves them to give them back or make an accord. I love this conversation about cultural diplomacy. So Colombia, Peru, different places have so much to offer, as does Italy. Italy's one of the hugest source nations of art and antiquities. And that's what my friend Stefano Alessandrini was talking about, cultural diplomacy. It's the Italian way, and it really can go far. You have an institution, you want to keep a good reputation, and you also, universities. So you make a deal with Colombia, you make a deal with Italy, and you get to have this cultural exchange of loans, of really precious artworks, you know, and also your students get to go there and study and research, and it works.
For that, sorry, just one point to Alessia, and what's how do you envision this being a stronger platform for the women's movement and kind of telling that story that is such an important story to tell, and it's how so many laws began in terms of workforce rights and women's rights. So how do you see that moving forward? So I think it's brilliant. It was really good.
I think that this story was definitely one of the first movements that happened that like eventually did lead to us as women to have like way more rights. Like I am here right now and I'm free to be a filmmaker thanks to them, because like at the time like this would have been something like, you know, unthoughtful or like unthinkable. I think that like we always need to remember where we come from and like, you know, be grateful for those women that put their life like on the frontier to have us like right now 100 years later be freer. And there is still so much work that we have to do and so many battles that we still have to fight, and then we lose and we win and then we keep losing and then we need to win again and so on. So there's still so much work that that we have to do, but we still have to remember where we came from.
And I would say that this film has a very universal message today, even with what's happening in Iran. And I lived in India for 2 years, and the women there are still experiencing this today. So,
Have you seen My Brilliant Friend at all? Yes.
I feel that I have, but now I'm blinking on it. Like it's very familiar, the title.
It's the HBO show Elena Ferrante. If you have,
Oh my God! Yes, is the TV series based on the books,
on the
right?
books,
Yes,
You've seen it, because when I was watching it, I was moved in a similar way to when I watched that show. Is any fans of the show in here?
Yes.
Of course.
Cool dialect in there
Of
too.
course. The first non-English language HBO show, just saying.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy that show and how
It's a good show.
it's a really good show. Very, 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 you know, hard to watch at times,
It
but
is hard, yeah.
but in a similar way, you know, I love how they bring women to the forefront and showcase their struggles.
Yeah.
Yes, would any of you folks be willing to share what your budgets were for the film?
I can share a little bit about that. Our school, Santa Monica College, helped us. They gave us a good number. We also received a grant from the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. We received camera equipment from Keslo Camera. And then of course we received this grant from the Film Forum. And it was significant, and it helped us to achieve what you saw on screen.
Because you had a lot of actors, I mean, they usually don't work for free, right? So.
Yeah.
And one of our actors is actually here today.
Yes, I saw her.
She's incredibly talented.
Yes. And I also have to add that like this movie was made with a lot of donations as well. All the clothes that you say were sent directly from Italy. A stylist called Alberto Zambelli, he is the one that completely designed everything, and he's a former Dolce & Gabbana designer. And then like the Dixie company in Italy completely produced them on their own like cost, because it was a story very important for them. They are like, you know, manufacturer of clothing, so obviously this was a story that it was close to their hearts, and so they donated everything. So obviously like this movie, was not only made out of money, but it was made out of hearts of people that really believed in the story, really wanted the story to get out of there, and in a way or another just like, you know, volunteered and helped to make the movie happen.
Including our location, it was gonna be around 2,000 per day, but she gave us a deal for 5,000 for every day that we shot on set.
Did you have a fiscal sponsor at all, by any chance?
No, but one of our mentors, Simone Bartasaghi, he's here. He
Stand
helped
up,
with-
take bow.
Our mentor and our executive producer, Salvador Carrasco. They helped with the fiscal aspects of the film, and yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't know if everyone here is familiar with fiscal sponsorship with filmmaking, but it's really awesome. I mean, if you get a fiscal sponsor for your film, donations to the film are tax deductible, so it's very beneficial for the filmmakers, especially if you're doing a small project, to get fiscal sponsorship. So if any filmmakers in the room, there's a number of fiscal sponsors out there. So if you need any advice on that, feel free to ask afterwards. But how did you apply for a Hollywood Foreign Press grant? I've never
That's
heard of
actually
it.
through our school.
Through Santa Monica College, man.
Yeah.
I went to NYU, they didn't hook us up with this.
It's a very good program, yeah.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah, I'd like to say something about that, because the way we got that grant from the Hollywood Foreign Press was by actually sitting them down and showing them some of our student films. We showed them a selection and they said, we want to get behind this. So I really think that's what does the talking for us. It's just the most eloquent resource we have to show the work of the students. Because you know, you can say whatever you like, but you can only feel what hopefully we all felt today by watching the film.
Yeah. I think what's so amazing about it too is that like people tend to like put down like the phrase student film, but like your film looks like a real film. And you had a small, you know, a fairly small budget, and what you've accomplished is truly amazing. So
And
Thank you.
just one more thing, not only is student film, but this happens to be a community college. And I think it's very relevant to mention that here with all the work that Dr. Biden has done in support of community colleges, because there is a lot of bias out there. We have been turned down by some festivals, and I do a little bit of digging and they didn't even watch the film because community colleges, maybe the quality is not that good. And I think that the value that our students bring to the projects, again, you saw it today, and it has nothing to do with socioeconomic background. It all has to do with their talent, their work ethic, and most importantly, their passion.
100%.
And that's not about how much money your family has.
Just gonna quickly find out about everyone else's budget. Agata, what was your budget?
Let me do the conversion. Probably about 15K US. I mean, it's a short doc, limited to one space. We'll sort of, you know, in my plans to keep the budget small, so we shot over 2.5 days. We were a crew of 3, and then a small post-production team.
So did your budget include post-production?
Yes.
As well?
Yeah.
That was
Yes,
your
it did.
budget? I mean, that your budget included
Yeah,
post-production.
that's, yeah.
Post-production often costs more than the
Correct.
actual film.
Well, it helps when you edit the film yourself.
Definitely.
And again, because it's a short film, you know, when you're doing color correction and mixing, you know, mixing and color correcting a 10-minute film versus a feature makes a big difference because they charge by the hour of work.
100%.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I produced a film that won a Russo Brothers grant, and it was the editing, sound, color, that was where all the money went.
I produce and PM a lot, and I always, you know, when my teams are like, yay, we finished shooting in doc, and I'm like, we're halfway there.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's important to highlight those people.
Yeah,
because-
especially in doc, the post, like in, you know, in fiction, a lot of the money goes into the production, but in doc, it's the post.
It's a post,
Yeah.
especially with sound. It's always sound.
Sound, color correction, if you're dealing, I mean, I didn't have that many archives, but if you're dealing with archival material, then, yeah, it can get expensive.
Yeah. Now, Charles, you were in Italy, so that must have cost a pretty penny, right?
So the budget, I really appreciate the Russo brothers and the Film Forum grant. I think it's wonderful when people who succeed in their art help artists, whether it's art, filmmaking, visual art, filmmaking, music. It's just really wonderful. That made this possible. I retired from the police department on February 1st of this year. And this was a blessing. This was a blessing because we had a mission. We're gonna make this film. And we spent more than the grant, but
We had a good time.
I got some
Money.
gifts. We had a big, huge, we have a family that everyone shows up. We could fill a room bigger than this with our family parties, and they all gave me a little money from my retirement. So we traveled a lot. We did Malibu, we did California, we did Boston, we did Italy. So we went a little above that.
Just a little bit, just a little bit.
Were any of your films shown at the San Diego Film Foundation Festival?
Agata.
Or supported by that?
That means I wish.
Well, technically it starts, so with the forum, technically we all wait till today. So I guess the screening life of the films will start from now.
Did you receive any funding from them?
Oh, well, I'm Canadian, so I'm not sure I'd be able to.
No, we did not.
So I'm familiar with the festival. The film I produced that won the Russo Brothers grant, we just played there.
Yeah, that's my family, just like.
That's your family? Well, thank you so
Mauricio.
much. So it's interesting with film festivals, people aren't aware. They won't allow you to do screenings publicly before you submit. So like this is technically a private screening. Otherwise you'll be disqualified. So in a lot of ways it's unfair to the filmmakers because they can't really show their film to the widest audience until they've completed their festival run. So, and the film festival work is a whole animal in itself. I personally find the filmmaking process doesn't really begin until you do the film festivals because there's hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, and sifting through these on the platforms, like, it costs, like, us to put our film in the festival, like, $10,000 just to, like, submit to film festival. So it's really something you have to budget for and consider. So just putting it out there, if anyone's submitting their films, you really have to think about where where you want to put it.
There's a strategy, yeah.
There's a strategy. Any questions?
As a follow-up, were legal expenses a big part of your budget, like, you know, errors and omissions policies and fair use protection and all that stuff?
Thankfully not so much, otherwise it would have been too expensive. Our school provided the insurance, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no, in Canada, I don't have to worry about E&O until film gets on television. So so far, my legal expenses have been zero.
Okay.
I was told I have some friends who are in film, and they said that fair use was pretty easy if you aren't making money on it. I know that there's a case that involved an Andy Warhol recently was supposed to be ruled on, and one way or the other on fair use. I don't know how that ended up, but we should have got that ruling last week. It might hurt documentarians because they might get, it's actually, it should have been ruled on already. I wish I knew one way or the other.
Charles, you're gonna have a tough time with a lot of your French.
I was going to say, I'll help you, but the film festivals are very, very strict because they will get in trouble
Yeah,
if you don't clear everything. I have to,
No, you do.
from
You have to clear
every
everything.
single music file, they will ask you for the original sound file and every single agreement that you've had, they just don't want to be sued. So it's just something to consider. Don't think about it at the end of the film, think about it in the beginning because you will have a huge headache at the end and you don't want your film to not be entered into a festival on account of, like a simple copyright thing. But I'll help you. I'll help you get everything clear.
Yeah, Charles, watching your film, I had my producer hat on and I was like, oh, did he get any rights to any of that stuff?
It's hard. It's hard.
You know, the thing is,
That's what kills your budget in documentary.
I wanted to get a message out.
Yeah.
And the message is important to me. I'm very passionate about Italian art. I'm an art world zealot, I believe. And I wanted to get this message out about the Lesipo, and I wasn't too worried about. And I did have people say, just put the fair use. You see it in the beginning and at the end.
It's tricky.
And it depends on what the life of the film you want it to be, right? Like if you want this to be on YouTube, no one's really gonna,
Actually, I heard they're pretty strict.
That's not
They'll
true.
kill you, but I have done similar things where, you could get away with it. But you had a number of months, right, to put this in.
I'm learning.
No, I got you. How many months did you have to make this film?
From April 1st till September 1st,
Right, so
it was a tight deadline.
It's a tight deadline, right? So I completely empathize. Like when we did our film, it was only a 30-minute film, but it took us, now we're 3 years in it because you constantly you'll want to update it, you'll get feedback and things like that. So it's only the beginning.
One thing, Charles, thank you for that last bit. I'm personally a fan of In Memoriam of, so I like that. And I wish I could see in the other two films, a picture of the wife, for example, and a list of the names of the women who perished in that
They just
way.
didn't run the credits.
Oh, the list
there.
is there.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they stopped it.
Okay, good. No, it'd be great to see the list of names. Okay.
Another thing just about legal fees that I thought is worth mentioning, I'm doing a film right now and we've expensed $50,000 for legal fees. So it's really something that
Ooh, that's more than we spend in Canada.
Yeah, if you want to make a movie, you wind up becoming, a fundraiser. You're wearing a lot of different hats. Who wants to worry about $50,000 for legal fees? But something that you really have to, account for. Really think about before you get started. So,
are you doing it for broadcast or just for?
Theatrical. Yeah. So it's just, contracts, distribution, things like that. It's a nightmare, but it's what you have to do. So, just put it out there if you're making a movie. More questions.
Can't ask another one.
Can I see who hasn't? Okay, over there. Sorry, we'll get back to you.
I was curious as to, what types of cameras everyone was using to film it?
For us, it was the Canon 300 Mark II. We shot in 4K, but obviously we delivered in digital.
We had Sony Venice with Cook lenses.
I went out and bought a Panasonic. I also bought mics, I bought lights, I bought all these things. And then it ended up, and I found out my iPhone does 4K. And so we used both, just because they see this nice camera coming and it looks a little more professional, but then I kept because that iPhone is amazing.
It is. I never knock anyone for shooting on an
RDPs are
iPhone.
rolling their eyes at him.
I shot an entire movie on an iPhone and it
Really?
got into 12 festivals
Wow.
and won 5 of them. And it was so much cheaper. And it was $1,000 budget. So,
100%, right? It's people care about the story. If you're investing in the story, you won't care as much about, But an iPhone looks really, really good.
It
Have you
does.
seen Tangerine? That was the first film ever shot in an iPhone. Oh my god.
And it was an iPhone 5.
An iPhone 5. That film is brilliant. It feels like a documentary. Please see it if you haven't seen it. But Tangerine, the director, he also did Red Rocket, which came out last year, and then the year before that, it was the Florida Project. He's an awesome filmmaker.
Yeah.
Sean Baker.
He's so nice.
The
Yeah.
newest iPhone, they say, I don't have the newest one, they say it's hot. Hollywood quality
Oh, yeah.
camera.
And you can get lenses for them too, which will make it look just as good. I shot some stuff on my iPhone for my film too, and I'm like, it looks awesome. You get the tripod going, like your tripod's over there. Look. Okay, more questions. Who has the next question? Don't be shy. Okay, come on, second question.
I'm leaving the factory. Years ago, I saw a documentary that questioned, well, the New York Police Department, Fire Department, did not rule it as arson. And I believe the owners were found not guilty. So can you just comment on your research, because the revelation was a little different than what I heard years ago.
Yeah, so both of them, they were notorious for setting fires in other factories just for the insurance money. And so it's not proven that it was arson for the Triangle Shirtwaist factory. However, the cause of it was like a cigarette butt in a tray. And we don't really know for sure, it's conjecture, but conspiracy. However, based on the way they've acted in other factories, and also, even though they might not have been responsible directly for the fire, they had such horrible safety measures that, for example, the doors were locked so they couldn't escape.
But that was not uncommon. You know, for theft, for reasons of theft, that they would lock those doors.
They also didn't have sprinklers.
Yeah, well, I know.
Yeah, you wouldn't lock a door though when you know that people are inside.
Seems coincidental.
Yeah.
So you know.
Oh, he
By the
thinks-
way, I made a mistake. I was thinking of one of the other tragedies during the Progressive era. They were Russian Americans. I was thinking of another factory. The two owners, Blank and
Harris.
Yeah, Harris. Thank you. With the other, because of the condition, because they just literally didn't clean the factory. It was either the match or the cigarette that hit the. They didn't collect. There were piles of just material, and the cigarette hit the pile. That's what they claimed. They had their the kids of the owners were actually there that day. They had visited the factory, but the conditions in the factory were so bad back then that a cigarette hit literally scraps of material, and it just
I think
went
that's
up.
what they were found guilty of.
Yeah.
A fire violation. That was it.
And they did have it, lots of stuff was chained and locked, but they weren't supposed to spend the night there. And they weren't,
Yeah.
Oh.
yeah. So their protocol was chain and lock the doors.
Oh.
Because usually no one was there. But the
So-
factory conditions were so deplorable. By the way, you could, if you were to continue, you could draw from the Triangle Shirtwaist Fact, your film, right into the 19th Amendment. There's a straight line from that right into the 19th Amendment.
So they had no idea that the women were there?
No, they knew the women were there, but they just figured we're gonna follow protocol and policy, and we chain and lock it up at night. If they wanna stay, they can stay. But they just, locked them in, but the problem was the health standards, and you just didn't have the policies yet of the way factories should be the progressive era in the United States, which was kicked off by Teddy Roosevelt, but the progressive era just wasn't full steam ahead yet, and the factories were nice. The bakers, the butchers, the factories, the clothing factories were terrible.
But what about his statement of my conscience is clear? What do you think
Oh,
that
they could lock
relates
them
to?
in, it didn't matter, who cares? Leave them in here, they can't breathe, whatever, my conscience is clear. If they wanna suffer in the factory, I don't care.
Okay.
Have you been to the Tenement Museum?
Yes.
So there's an interesting story there. Part of the reason why they closed the tenement was they didn't have money to install the fire protection codes in like 1930, 1931, so they had to close that place. So it was not uncommon for places not to have, no one had the fire safety at that point.
The progressive era hadn't set in yet, it's just
Right,
the
right,
rules
right.
and laws hadn't set in yet.
I'm curious, what did you all learn about yourselves while making this movie?
Good question.
Yeah.
I would say for producing, it's all about relationships and getting to know people, and I feel the more you treat people with respect and kindness, you can get more done. And I appreciated that.
It's a team effort. Every single person in a film production is extremely valuable.
Exactly.
One person can do something wrong, one person do something great, it is going to have a huge effect on what you see on screen. So I completely agree with you. You treat people with kindness outside of making a film too, but especially when making a movie. keeping the morale up. Those hours are long. I mean, you guys. How long did it take? You were probably working like at least 10-hour days on something like that, right?
Yeah, I think it was like between 12 to 18 hours days. So it was like a long time, because we also were in a super time crunch. Like we shot over 8 days, I believe. So like Thursday to Sunday, like for 2 weekends in a row. So it was like, yeah, it was a lot. Definitely, like I learned how to manage like sleeping schedule, because it's hard. And at the same time I was having finals at school, so that was like going to school in the morning, going to shooting at night. It was like a whole thing. But I agree with Andrew. I definitely like learned that leadership, it's very much like people, especially like below the line, you know, workers are really looking up to you. So if you look stressed, if you look tired, they will be stressed, they will be tired. And at the same time, like, because we are all students, obviously, we didn't, like, not many people were paid on the job, obviously. And so if you are not passionate about what you do and about the story that you tell, then people are not gonna follow you. Because if it doesn't matter to you that you're the leader, then it won't matter to other people either. So like, you know, there is a lot of like people, especially students, wants to make movies just to make movies, but you really have to choose the right subject, to choose something that you deeply care about, so that you can carry the entire crew with you and make everybody passionate about it.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you know, we were talking a little bit about community colleges and things like that. Like, I went to NYU Tisch, and I found that a lot of the students, as much as it's a prestigious film school, like a lot of people were there to make films because it was fun. Like, it was just something they do. And like, there's probably a real difference where like you're going to a community college and like you have to be passionate about what you're doing. It's not just like a pastime, right? So, and another thing like I've learned too, and like bringing back to like teamwork, showing people appreciation, like always saying thank you. Like you guys are like commending, you know, your sponsors and mentors and actors and actresses. It's so true. It's like make people feel appreciated, especially, you know, if they're not paid or they're not paid like, you know, Hollywood movie star or whatever. And that's things that go along like kindness and appreciation. So 100%. Agata, what did you learn about yourself?
So in documentary, it's all about patience. You know, since I interviewed Ernest for another film I did, I've been wanting to do something on him. So for about 10 years, every time I go see him, I'm like, oh, I'd love to do something with him again. And an opportunity came, this great grant, thank you to the Russo brothers and the NOIAFT. And, you know, within, you know, I call my crew, I have a really cool team that I work with all the time. So, you know, I send them a text. I'm like, hey guys, we're going to New York. We're finally, you know, doing something with Ernie. So patience is the game in this field.
Yeah. Who won I'm forgetting who won the honorary Oscar. A very famous Italian female filmmaker. One of you will remind me who it is. But she said passion and patience. That's what she said you need in life, but especially in filmmaking.
Lena Warren?
Yes. That's who won. And she said passion, and she passed away, I think, last year. But she said passion and patience. And I live by that for sure. What did you learn about yourself, Charles?
I learned that film is an amazing medium. It's actually a powerful medium. I think visually like an artist, and think of visually isn't enough in film, but art is a powerful medium. Film is an extremely powerful medium to express yourself or to get a message across. I didn't know anything about making films, so April 3rd, I get the email saying I got the grant, and I start buying equipment, learning how to use it. So I'm stressing the brain, but thinking differently than you're always used to is good. So now I have to learn new things, we have to do new things, and we're learning how to make these films. At the same time, we're trying to get it all together, make reservations for the different hotels. You gotta make reservations for the museums because they just don't let you walk in anymore, not all of them. And I'm thinking, this is incredible. What must go through? How much work goes into those major motion pictures? You know, here we're trying to do this small film, and it's a lot of work. And there's so much more than visual. You can't just think visually because that doesn't cut it. It's so all-encompassing, you know, sound, stories. And at the same time we started doing this film, they aired The Offer on Paramount Plus for the show.
Yeah,
what they went through,
yeah.
and then I'm seeing everything that could have went wrong on that major motion picture. Everything could have went wrong. And even Francis Ford Coppola, thinking like an artist. We have to go to Sicily. It's the most important scene. It's the visual, right? And then they're saying, you don't have the money, shoot it in Utah. And Utah, we have to go to Sicily. And then he runs into problems there when he finally gets to Sicily. So I learned a lot in this. We learned a lot.
Yeah.
And it's good to work the brain. It's good to change, especially artistically. And I want to keep going. It's fun.
Yeah.
Main thing I learned was film is a powerful medium and it's fun.
Mm-hmm. It's fun, but it's hard. It's hard
It's
work.
hard.
It's really hard work. It's really hard work. Well, you brought up a good point. I'm curious. Compromise. You're making a movie. You have an idea in mind of how you want to make it. You have to make some compromises. When was a time when you were making this movie that you had a compromise, but that it actually served to your benefit?
I would say our ending to the film. We originally were going to shoot a scene at a school, and we were going to go forward in time to kind of show how things have changed for women. However, we didn't have the budget to do something like that, and we had a time constraint. So instead, we shot that last scene in a soundstage in our school, and I think it worked out beautifully. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Again, this was a really short production shoot, but I had originally planned, there were a bunch of people that were I was gonna have a whole sequence where sort of customers just happened to come in the store and interact with Ernest. I kind of, was a little set up, and then I started losing people, and we got a few. I didn't like how it turned out, so in the end, I'm like, you know what, it's about Ernie. So everything I tried to do, we sort of lost a half day of filming. It was fine, because, I could have kept Ernie going for even longer. So yeah, that's the sort of, you have to adapt. So that particular sequence didn't work, but Ernie on his own worked instead.
Yeah, it's in his words.
Yeah.
It's a portrait.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. But in documentary, I always tell my teams, when we have a schedule and we work really hard to sort of organize things and people and places, but you have to adapt. And in the end, I find, sometimes things that don't work out, it kind of was okay. Other times, no, but then it's the gems, the unexpected gems that are always amazing in doc.
Well, I think with doc is that you can prepare, but I mean the same with regular narrative filmmaking, but with documentaries, the story is usually always evolving. Like maybe not so much with this where it's a 10-minute piece, but with documentaries, you have to be prepared for anything.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can't adapt, you cannot work in documentary.
You cannot work. You really. How about you?
My compromise is easy, and I'm sure my wife will agree.
Let's give a shout out to Maria.
The way I originally wrote this, that would have been about an hour and 45 minutes or longer. Her and my daughter said, you have to cut so much of this. There was so much to say, and it got way too long. And I'm afraid I'm not getting it all in there. And they helped me to say, this could go, this could. One thing I wanted to get in was, and you saw I showed one special church that was St. Lucy's in Newark, and what used to be called the First Ward. It is an amazing Italian church. I saw one in San Diego when we were out there in Little Italy, and in New York, in the beautiful church with the shrine of San Gennaro in Little Italy. There's so many nice churches that these Italian immigrants built. Art is such an important part of Italian life and culture. Even if you didn't grow up in a Florence, or even the diaspora that sent all the immigrants here, they might not have known much about art, but their life was art. They really did live life, like Gabriele D'Annunzio says. You have to live life like you make a work of art. Devi fare la vita come si fa un'opera di arte, It's and they showed it in everything they did. I really wanted to get that in there. I wanted to show more of the churches and how they took the time to build those structures and put in the statues from every town they came from and the painted ceilings. the way
That's
they're
your
all
next,
built.
that's your next film.
Yeah, so, but thank God they talked sense into me because
I think you had a tough job, right? Because you can essentially tell the history of art, you know, through what you're explaining. And so delineating that down to like just, you know, the meat and potatoes is really, really hard. That's why an editor is the person in a movie who really makes the film, right? Like, you know, as a filmmaker, you have an idea of like what you want, that editor comes in.
my daughter Alessandra was good at editing and she
Good at
helped,
editing,
she
just
did that.
Finding that focus, it's really tough. And
We
like,
sat
and
there
it all
and
makes- it's crazy, like all the years of experience you have, and you know, you're coming at it with a bias, like you know, it's all important, right? And then, you know, you have to put it down to an hour and a half. Like what do you do? It's such hard work. So
Yes.
glad you had your wife and daughter
Yeah.
by your side. I think we are out of time, folks. I'm so sorry. This was such a great conversation. Please wish the filmmakers good luck tonight. It'll be really Thank you so much. Thank you. And if you want to take pictures of the filmmakers, now is the time.
So the other one's at 12 or 12?
Yeah, please contact me, we'll stay in touch.
Oh yes, 100%. And kudos to you that you did your first movie like an hour. Like my first movie was 5 minutes. Like it's tough. Like
We usually
really,
go
I
very
don't know,
short.
like with what's trying to, you know.
more within limits of.
Oh my God.
Hi, everybody. Before you start saying hellos, I want to get a few photographs, okay?
Oh yes.
Okay. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you to you and your family.
Let's see what's best. I don't know if that light in the background, if that's going to distract me. Maybe in front of the white screen.
Maybe it won't give it and then the background is
Okay,
nice.
fine.
All the chairs.
She'll take photos.
You got it.
Thanks a million.
You got it.